Hi, I'm Chuck Gibson. This is Loveland Beacon Talks. Today we are joined by Linda Cecil, candidate for the Loveland School Board, in the final of our four-part special edition, Getting to Know Your Loveland School Board Candidates. Now it's my pleasure to welcome guest candidate Linda Cecil. Well, welcome, Linda Cecil. Thank you for joining us here on Loveland Beacon Talks, the special edition of Getting to Know Your Candidates. So thanks for joining us today. And I'm going to get right to it, Linda. I'm going to start with, we want people to really get to know you, so I'm going to start with a simple question. So who is Linda Cecil? Who are you?
Well, first, thank you for having me.
You're welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Linda Cecil is, first, a mom. I have a 19-year-old daughter that graduated from Loveland schools after going through K through 12, so she had the full experience in 2022, and she's currently a student up at UC. I graduated from Indian Hill High School, grew up down in Kenwood, went from Kenwood to Price Hill, have traveled all over the United States for different jobs. I worked in New Jersey, I worked in New York City, I worked in Los Angeles, I've worked up in Toledo, and I've done quite a bit of work over in the Orient and with Europe. I have worked for very large companies, Disney with 220,000 employees, MeasureX, Microsoft, Kinder Toys, Tyco Toys, and Jackson Hewitt. And I have done many seminars in my life to cross-train between departments, to educate my tax business. I used to train for Jackson Hewitt the entire Cincinnati area, which was about 250 employees at a time.
Wow.
I came to Loveland in 1998 when I came back to the Cincinnati area. I have enjoyed Loveland. I support the schools. I believe in public education. I had a brother with cystic fibrosis. I saw what my parents did to support him through school. My daughter has chronic migraines, so she was on a 504 plan. I know what it's like to fight for your kid and want them to have the absolute best. But are we getting that? We have a 5-star rating, which is great. Make no mistake about that. But we also have 57% passing minimum state standards in geometry and only about 10 points higher than that in algebra. So we're missing a huge portion of kids as they're coming out of school with a very key need to be able to survive out in the real world in any kind of job.
Well, and we're going to get to that. You're going to get a chance to talk some more about that. But, that kind of, as I said, a thumbnail sketch, who is Linda Cecil? Well, the next thing is, yeah, you warned me. No, you did great. That was not, you didn't babble on. You're fine. Don't worry about it. But, the other thing is, so, Linda, obviously with your daughter at 19, now a student at UC, and, life settles a little bit for you. Maybe not, but the bottom line is you're probably in a fairly, good spot in your life. And so the next question is what kind of comes from that. If you're in a pretty good spot, and the experience you've had in the working world, especially all over the world, my question becomes to each of the candidates and you right now is, why are you seeking election to the school board?
Well, I have not been a particularly political person. You vote, and you expect the world to take care of itself, pretty much. Well, in 2019, that changed. We were offered a 16 mil levy, and we got together and said, this is going to destroy our community. And so we put together a group, and we've worked against that levy. Now, my daughter took all kinds of grief in school and asked me to please wait until she graduated to run for the board. So that is exactly what I've done. This is the first opportunity after her graduation to run. There is a lot I believe I can bring to the table.
And that's the next question. If you want to transition into it, we can go there. But really, the next thing was going to be, what are, and you don't have to keep it to this number, but my question really goes down to, what are the 3 things that you might say qualify you or make you uniquely qualified to serve on the Board of Education for the Loveland School District?
Well, as I said, I've done many, many trainings, which means I have an ability to communicate and to put it into terms that an individual that I'm training might understand. I believe I can bring that to the board and help the community understand what the board's doing as opposed to here's an agenda item and we pass it.
Yeah.
So if the community understands and then can help, that brings the community back together. The other part is, as you're going out and you're working with individual people, you see what they're thinking. And there's a large portion of the community that simply is not brought into the Loveland school decision-making. I've seen people who have served on committees that say, I'll never serve on another committee again. And the reason is they don't feel like they were heard. Now, I've asked those individuals, if I'm elected, would you come work with me? And they've instantly said, yes. So I believe I can bring that group back into the schools and helping to support the schools. One of the other fortes that I've had in my career is being able to go in and, yes, identify a problem. But as someone who's in a company and responsible for the function, you have to come up with an answer, a solution, and implement it.
I was going to say, when you say, it's easy to identify the problems, but you already addressed the second half of that. Well, that's great that you can identify a problem, but can you propose solutions? And that's
well, let me give you one instance. So I went in and met with Mike Broadwater when I was appointed to this position, and we were talking. We were talking about busing. As you're aware, we currently don't have high school busing. They tell me it's 15 to 17 drivers to be able to, I think that's, 12 to 15 drivers to be able to re-implement. They just can't find drivers. Okay, so you can come at this from 2 or 3 possible solutions. What the school has done is gone out and reached out for those kids who absolutely can't make it to the school and tried to find somebody in the neighborhood who could actually transport them. As the busing crisis goes on, because more and more people are retiring and fewer are stepping in, now you've got additional things that are going to have to be done to busing if we don't find another solution. So I suggested to Mike, could we partner with the city of Loveland? They have no parking on weekends. We have poor traffic flow. Could we possibly use the school parking lots, run a shuttle bus, and have some kind of public transportation that the school wouldn't necessarily be responsible for that would help from hub points out in the community? He said he was going to talk to Mr. Kennedy about that and see what he could do. The other thing that I've been doing is lobbying at different levels up at Columbus. And one of the suggestions I've made is if we can change our driving laws so that it's not just siblings and 1 passenger, but could we extend that to 2? I know my daughter was commuting with people and going and picking up somebody, taking them to school, and then going and getting somebody else. Wouldn't it be nice if we could carpool a little bit wider?
Right. And the point being, in response to the question and what you're sharing, those are good examples of, hey, the busing is an issue right now, so that's a clearly identified problem. Here are a couple of, potential solutions.
Right.
So, I think that's a key thing for anybody, is to not just be critical, find the, we hear people say this is a problem and they need to fix it. Well, it sounds like what you bring to the table is somebody who's going to try to think through and offer solutions when you see problems.
And that's what I'm trying to do.
Right.
It is, when somebody says to me, oh, this is so complicated, I can't explain it to you, I think that's a failing on their part. You've got to sit down and figure it out and bring it to a level that you can understand.
Yeah. Well, so when I got here, what you just shared is obviously what you're bringing is that experience as a trainer, so ability to train and understand and help other people understand. The other thing is, obviously what we just talked about, identifying problems and offering solutions. And then that being seen and heard aspect where you think you can bring, because there has been a divide since 2019 especially. I don't really think there was so much before that, but certainly since 2019 we've seen a divide. And so you're saying, you have the ability, that's one of the things that you'll bring. And of course you've been serving as an appointee, but now you're seeking election, which is to try and carry out those things beyond where you're at today.
There's two aspects to the divide, maybe 3. One of which is those who just can't afford it. right?
Right.
And you're being driven out of the community, driven out of your home that you've had maybe generationally. The other point is the vitriol that has gone on, and people just flat out being attacked. Well, what's happening with that is people just get quiet. It's not gone away. I mean, I've had a member of the board say to me, oh, we've seen this before. We've seen people go out against a levy, but then they go away. This is not going away. This is a section of the community that simply needs another method. And so part of what I'm doing is I'm trying to get people to look at another method, because forever real estate taxes is not going to do it for us.
Personally, I'm with you. In all honesty, I think that nobody thinks that forever real estate taxes is the answer. It's just been, the forced answer because of the way public schools are funded in the state of Ohio. So, and that's a whole different topic. But you made a good transition because you start talking about some of the things that need to happen and need to be addressed. And that next question for you, Linda, is, what would you say are the top 3 priorities to continue to improve or to repair any things that, that has to happen for the Loveland City School District to thrive for our students? So, what would be, if elected, what are maybe the top 3 things that you want to see?
Fiscal transparency. And nobody ever heard this until a few years ago. Now, every candidate says, I want fiscal transparency. I'm a fiscal conservative. But are they really? I've gone into companies my entire career and saved millions of dollars at a pop. And it's all about understanding the process and finding a better way. I'm not going to tell you I'm going to go into Loveland schools and wipe out 10% of the staff and save that money. What I'm going to tell you is I'm going to be very careful about understanding what we're really forecasting. When we forecasted our last November statement, we were off by $5 million. Then they forecasted in May and brought it in to 1.9, which they say is a small amount, but we already passed the levy at that point. So was it really honestly to put that high-end forecast out there and then say I need a levy? Well, our community needs to know, and that's part of what's going on right now is people don't believe what's being said by the school. I would like to be the voice that somebody can count on and say, when I say it's this much money, it really is this much money. And when I say we really need some additional funds, and here's how I propose we do it, somebody's going to look at me and go, okay, I can understand now clearly what you're saying, and we can do that. We just signed 3 major contracts for our teachers' unions, for the administrative staff, and for the other union that we're involved in. They passed them. How much did they just sign off on? Do you know?
I don't know.
Exactly. But shouldn't that be automatic?
Well, here's the question on that.
Here's how much it is.
So I believe, and I may believe this wrongly, that money from the school that's being spent by the school and now goes into, so the transparency thing has been addressed by the schools. You go to whatever that site is, which I can't think of off the top of my head right now. So
are we talking about the Ohio checkbook?
Ohio checkbook, where you can see exactly what's happening.
You can't see exactly what's happening.
And this isn't for you and I to debate. I don't want to put you on a spot or make you try to defend a position. What you're saying, number one, is you want to work toward true fiscal transparency,
right,
and not just some common term in Ohio checkbook. I was going to say, it's not to question, because I could throw out, right now, you mentioned, that 5-star rating,
right,
for Loveland schools.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other thing you'd throw into it in terms of how they're spending a dollar is they're among the best in the state out of the, I think it's 607 public school districts throughout the state of Ohio. It might be 602.
I'm going to ask you based on what?
Well, I'm just saying they're among the best in terms of cost per student.
Okay.
Whatever's that, what is that formula? I don't know. I'm not at the state. The state's the one that said that.
That's the problem. We don't know.
Right.
So when somebody says we have 4,200 students in our school, which I believe is what the state is saying, something right around there.
Yeah.
And one of the things I asked Garth to do was add in student head count And if you listen to the last meeting, you listen to a whole explanation about why a head count is different. And that 4,200 is all students in Loveland, not in the school, in Loveland. So are the kids who are going to Moeller included in that number? Yeah, on the 4,200. When we're talking 3,900 and some odd students.
This is not Loveland City School District enrollment.
Right, the 3,900 is enrollment. That's
Okay.
how much money we get
So
from
that's
the
the head
states
count,
and whatever.
actual enrollment.
So when you're dividing out those numbers, which numbers is being used? Well, if you go look at the reports, it's like a 4,200 number up at the state. Well, that's not how many are actually in Loveland schools. That's not butts in seats. That's not who we're being financed by the state for.
Right.
And when you look at the 9,000 something something, which is what the per student count is, that's direct student expenses. So
But we can go,
I don't know how many
Yeah.
how many accountants you've ever worked with, but the first.
Well, my dad was a CPA.
Okay, so the first rule is, when I want to present a number, I want the number to look advantageous, right?
Well, sure.
Great. So how do you do that? If I look at the entire set of numbers, well, I might not get that. If I look at the subset of numbers, oh, that gives me what I want.
It's a better look.
Okay, so they talk about direct student expenses. Well, that doesn't include the building. That doesn't include busing. That doesn't include all of the different expenses out for activities. That's
Well, those are
just
and those
teachers'
are questions.
numbers.
Those are questions that people have to ask. And then apparently, what you're saying when you talk about true fiscal transparency, you're going to ask those questions and share that information. And that's number one.
That's it.
And that's not, and I'm going to move. I don't mean to force the issue, but how much time
But
do we want to take?
I want people to understand what
Right,
those numbers
right.
are, where they come from, and what they really mean.
Yeah.
The second issue is, if you go and look at those numbers, there's a state minimum threshold, and you heard me allude to it earlier, that is for our students' testing. So we have like 88% of our students meet American history and government. Great, right? Except it's down 4 points from the last time I looked. The geometry is down at 57.8%. So that means 42.2% aren't meeting that standard. Shouldn't all of our students meet it? Mariemont meets it. They're in the 90s for everything. Wouldn't that be a nice thing? Shouldn't we require that? So I would put a strong focus on getting students up to those state minimum standards. Now,
Which I think so.
So that's number two.
I'm going to say that's number two in terms of the things that you say are priorities.
and the third
for the
priority
school.
is better communication.
Right.
And when I say better communication, I mean getting the entire community involved. We have some great people in this community. They probably know the answers to any problem we can throw out there. We have some people who dig like you wouldn't believe to come up with answers and come up with possibilities, to get them back involved, to get our students moving forward, because that's what we all want, is to get our kids in a better place than we were. And you and I talked a little bit before this about my own kid, getting
Right.
her in a better place than what I came into. Generational education, generational wealth, these are all good things.
Right.
So that's the third point I'm looking for.
Well, again, the question, you've answered the question. These are the three priorities. I do want to touch on the communication one a little bit additional because, again, I believe, maybe wrongly, I'm listening, I've asked questions, I've done the interviews with our, other board members in the past. Certainly I can't tell you how many conversations with Mike Broadwater. He's been outstanding in terms of accessibility for me. We've had a lot of conversations. So I believe, getting to my point here with regard to communication, the school, how much can you do? You invite the people to come and engage, and they either show up or they don't. Now, I'll bet, and I could be wrong, you tell me, you were there for the town hall meeting a couple weeks back, 3 weeks ago, I think. And there's another one coming up, next week. What was the turnout?
Very small.
Right. And so the question to you as a candidate, and you don't.
But did you read the questions?
That were proposed for the town hall meeting.
Yeah.
I
you
saw
seen
the
them?
I saw the
Okay.
questions. Yeah.
So when you want
I look
somebody,
at the link.
when you want somebody's opinion, you don't give them a sales job and then phrase the question in such a way that you get the answer.
We're on the same page.
And that's a problem. What you want is people to actually give you input. Mr. Broadwater has a committee, which, bless him for doing it, it's the right thing, of kids in the school to propose solutions for the school. Take a look at them. They're obviously very engaged, very good students. I met one of them when I came
Right,
into
yeah,
it.
sure.
But what about all the kids who aren't engaged? And this is, I do my own little research groups among the kids that flow through my house. And they said to me, the school didn't like me because I wasn't in the cookie cutter, and so they don't listen to me. And I said, well, would you answer a survey if they came out to you? And they said, if it was an honest survey, yeah. I may tell them to pound sand, meaning, I don't like the
I
school.
understand.
But you need to listen to those answers. And the kids who are now graduating, the school has no hold over them, so they might give you some very honest answers about what's wrong, what's right, how to make it right.
How did, just sticking with like the response from the community,
Mm-hmm.
and so I understand that. I mean, I don't respond to surveys. You go to the doctor, and then they say, what was your experience? You go to the auto repair shop, and what was your experience?
Right.
Those questions are the questions they want, and then they don't do anything if you say that
Right.
it was garbage. I can tell you a health, concern story that doesn't have anything to do with this. But how do you, well, no, I'll go to this. So the school also just had the showcase last Wednesday
Right.
night. Since
And I went to that,
since
too.
we're talking on Monday,
Mm-hmm.
this will probably air Tuesday, just 1 week before the election, just so people that are listening right now understand, as we record this, Linda, probably for certain it'll happen Tuesday. People may hear this even as we're speaking Monday. They may hear this later on today. But how did the showcase look? What kind of turnout from the public? What did that look like to you?
I saw mostly parents wandering around with their kids. I saw minimal community turnout. But this goes back to what I started to say in the very beginning of this. People have been turned off. You have a silent
Right.
group in the community that has to feel welcomed back. It's not going to be about putting out a brochure that says, come to this, or putting up a yard sign. It's about making people feel like they really are valued. And it's the same problem with educating some of those kids I was talking about that aren't necessarily the 4.0 or aren't all engaged. They don't feel like they're a part of the process. So how do you make them feel a part of the process? You listen.
Yeah. Well, and that takes us through the 3 priorities. I appreciate your time. We're coming to the end for the final question, and you'll probably like this one because it gives you a chance to just say so. But so, Loveland City School District voters, they have a choice. A week. Well, on Tuesday, November 7th. And they've got 4 candidates. Linda, Cecil, you're one of them. So why should Loveland City School District voters vote for Linda Cecil to continue, since you've been an appointee and you're serving on the board right now? Why should they elect you to continue serving on the Board of Education for Loveland City Schools?
Well, number one, I'm diversity. So I'm not part of the school bubble. I have not been on all the committees, so I haven't already given my input on all these things. It's a new voice. Okay. Secondly, because I have the financial background to actually go in and look at things, and I look at them differently. I am absolutely pro-education and pro-public school. That's, obviously putting my daughter through Loveland. I could have pulled her and gone somewhere else. I didn't. I believe in the after-school activities. I was a national thespian for drama club. My brothers sang in choir and baseball and basketball, and I kept stats for all those teams. Again, stats, numbers.
There you go. But extracurriculars is
Right.
Yeah. You're not trying to shut those all down. Reading, writing, and arithmetic. End of story.
But that is the primary focus, right? If you're
Should be.
not having good grades, if you're not getting your kids to that state minimum standard, well, it's great that they play football, but what are they going to do after football? I've had pros.
That's a tough job to get. Remember, we had that conversation
Well,
before.
I've had pros come to me who played for the Reds, and now they're doing woodworking because shoulder got thrown out. They didn't have retirement the way they should have, and they had to come up with another career. Well, if you can't do something, then you're hurt.
And that's the education.
I'm going to put in an absolute plug here because the programs that they've got going for, I want to say co-oping, absolutely excellent. It gives the kids a broad view of what's going on in the community and what else they might have career-wise as opposed to fast food worker or doctor. There's a lot in between that. And we need those things, right? You hired a plumber lately? Oh, my Lord.
No, I mean, those if you
So-
listen out there in the world today, people talk about those positions, and those are good living.
Yep.
And they are, and we need them.
Absolutely.
There's probably some pretty good job security in being a plumber, an electrician, so on and so forth. The trades, as they typically call them.
I've also done facilities, so I understand a lot of what goes on, and I just ask questions. I mean, we have gotten so used to just things happening. And Kevin said to me, well, when I have good people, I don't micromanage. It's like, well, that's true. But it's public money. The public needs to know we're asking the questions and why. So that's why you should vote for me. Because I'm going to be asking the questions, and I'm going to keep chasing it until I come up with a reasonable answer.
Fair enough. Well, Linda, again, thank you so much for joining us here on Loveland Beacon Talks, the special edition, getting to know your Loveland School Board candidate. I hope people listen and got a chance to know you better today, so thank you for sharing that.
What you didn't hear on here, if you would go to my website, which is Cecil.
Oh, thank you.
Schools.com, CecilForSchools.com.
Cecil4schools.com, just like it sounds, spell it correctly, all one word, .com.
You'll see a lot more about me, including a lot of endorsements that I've received. Now, I want to sort of explain those endorsements, if you'll bear with me for just a minute.
Go ahead.
That's proof that I've been out there talking to people in different groups. You may or may not like one or other of the groups, but I didn't go out and do big presentations to get that support, excuse me. What I have done is introduced myself, presented a resume, my bio, and what I think our schools ought to be doing.
And that's what this was all about, so.
And they have decided to support me for that.
Well, that's the other part, folks, for those of you who are listening. Hopefully this has helped you get to know Linda Cecil a little better. And as she just said, Cecil4schools.com, and you can even find more information about Linda. Bottom line is, please go to the polls on
Absolutely.
Tuesday, November 7th.
Or
and
now.
Cast an well, you can vote, or early voting's in place, but when you go, hopefully you've learned a little bit about all the candidates and you can make an informed choice. And
Thank you, Chuck.
appreciate it. You're welcome. Thanks for being with us. That was Linda Cecil, one of 4 candidates for the 2 open seats on Loveland School Board. You can learn more about Linda's campaign online at www.cecilforschools.com. This concludes the Loveland Beacon Talks 4-part series of candidate interviews, getting to know your Loveland School Board candidates. We hope these interviews have helped you get to know each candidate better to help you make an informed choice when you cast your ballot now through Election Day, Tuesday, November 7th. Until next time on Loveland Beacon Talks, I'm Chuck Gibson saying thanks for listening. Loveland Beacon Talks is a presentation of Loveland Beacon Digital Media and Gibson Communications, LLC.